everyone, and welcome to Meet Us on the Abraham Path. I'm Anisa Mehdi, Executive Director of the Abraham Path Initiative. Today, we're talking about cultural heritage, arts, ceramics, weaving, jewelry, and so on, with our friends at Turquoise Mountain. We'll ask about the viability of supporting independent traditional craftspeople in a world that seems dominated by online ordering, Amazon, Etsy. And how does supporting artisans preserve heritage that's under threat? And what does that have to do with you? I'm glad you're joining us in this conversation. Please put your questions in the Q&A that's on your control panel, and we will ask them of our guest, Shoshana Stewart, president of Turquoise Mountain. Welcome, Shoshana. It's so great to see you here.
Very happy to be here.
Well, your job demands a lot of travel. And I think especially since the pandemic, you've been bouncing all over the place. Where have you been and where are you now?
Yeah, I have been bouncing. I've managed to move 4 times since COVID started, which I wouldn't really recommend. But so I'm in London, which has been home for a long time, but not very much over the last few years. I've been living in Jordan, in Amman, for the last 2 years and loved it. Loved being there.
Well, I lived in Amman as a Fulbright scholar more than a decade ago, and I think about it every day. It's a wonderful city, and the people match the wonders of the city, don't you think?
It's so fabulous, and we lived right off of Rainbow Street, in the middle of the sort of oldest bit.
Sure.
With Sufra, my favorite restaurant. We lived
know it well.
I was a happy camper.
Yeah. We were down in Shmesani, a bit of a walk, near the Fifth Circle, but it's a great city to live in, even to walk in, as crazy as it is. Trees growing out of the middle of the sidewalks and all of that.
We would actually walk from our place in Jebel Amman down into the Balad and straight up to the Citadel. It only takes about 20 minutes if you go in the back way. So it's amazing. If you just embrace the hills, it's a great walking city.
It is, if you embrace the hills and that Hercules temple, those 2 strong pillars, so masculine, so sexy. Anyway, Turquoise Mountain, in brief, is a not-for-profit founded by His Majesty King Charles III in 2006, basically to revive historic areas and traditional crafts. Shoshana, you'll be telling us a whole lot more about them, but you've been to a lot of the places where Turquoise Mountain shows up. Where do you have your workshops? Where are you focused? And what are you focusing on?
So we were set up for Afghanistan, and that's where I found Turquoise Mountain 17 years ago, when His Majesty set it up, and a man named Rory Stewart, later to be my husband, set it up, and I appeared as a volunteer and fell in love with cultural heritage through Afghanistan. So that has been the heart of our project in the beginning, and I lived there for about 5 years. But we then set up in Myanmar, and then in different parts of the Middle East. And so we work in Saudi Arabia, and we now work with Syrians, Jordanians, Palestinians from our 2 homes in Amman, and most recently in Bethlehem. So I've only lived in 2 of those places, spent a lot of time in all the other ones. But I suppose the way that it works for us is that I have something like 500 staff members, but 490 of them are in those places. And 480 of them, or 485 of them, are from those places. And so our heart is really in the places we work, and we try to be there for a long time to live and love the bits of artisanal heritage that we exist to protect and to further and to love.
Well, specifically, those are areas where cultural heritage is under threat. There's been conflict in all of the places that you have mentioned. And then post-conflict issues, just trying to recover one's dignity, one's home, one's ability to be educated and see beyond tragedy. How does that affect you personally? I mean, how do you deal with being in those places that so much wrong has been done to?
Yeah, you're right. I mean, we exist to preserve and promote cultural heritage where it is under threat. That is not by coincidence that I work in the places where, we as a sort of international community have probably the most difficult relationships with.
Why do anything that's going to be easy anyway, right?
That's sort of weird. That's by design, and my own. So yeah, it's an interesting one, the personal question, because I'm of two minds, I suppose. The hard part is watching, particularly over the last couple of years, when Afghanistan was taken over by the Taliban and Myanmar was taken over by the Burmese military government. Those were very, very significant transitions is a ridiculous word, but just incredible upheaval in people's lives. And I watched life become very, very hard for everyone we worked with. Now, for me personally, it was very difficult to watch that happen in Afghanistan and to work through how you deal with working there, which we do still. I have 250 staff there. But actually, what I found over the last 2 years is that because when that sort of thing happens, you figure out real quick whether what you do works or not, or whether it matters or not. Because when you have very significant humanitarian crises, people are not going to do things that don't work. People are not going to do things that don't matter, right? And so that is what I found out, is it really mattered. Almost the worse things were, the more it mattered. And so I asked myself why. And the reality is I love my job. I love it more today than I did 15 years ago. And it's because, I was in Afghanistan this summer, Bethlehem this summer, I was in Damascus this summer, and in all these places, life is not easy. But when you have a possibility of earning an income for your family, that is totally central. But to do something that is with your hands and that is beautiful and that is an ambassador for your inheritance and that brings you and other people some sense of joy, that's an amazing thing in a very difficult place. So I actually find that personally, just doing the business of what we do actually is a very joyful thing, and I enjoy it a lot.
Well, now I'm going to ask how you ended up doing this. I mean, you have an MBA from the London Business School, a master's in education, a bachelor's degree in astrophysics from Williams College in Massachusetts. You've been a teacher and administrator in low-income urban communities with Teach for America. What drew you to Afghanistan? What drew you to this kind of, what lit your passion for this work?
It's total serendipity. It makes no sense. Yeah, I was an astrophysics major because I loved Star Trek and I like physics. I was never going to be
I don't know about physics, but Star Trek, I'm all about it.
Yes, exactly. I was never going to be, I like managing stuff, but I love kids. I was a teacher, and I was tagging along with somebody doing research, PhD research on Afghanistan. So I just took a year off teaching and I was going on an adventure. It was nothing more than that. I knew nothing about Afghanistan. I knew nothing about traditional craft, and so I just started helping out. I was just a volunteer. But interestingly, because I don't come from the academic cultural heritage community, it's not what I was trained in. My only qualification for my job is I've been doing it for 17 years. So I have fallen in love with craftsmanship by doing it, not because I came to it thinking this is the way to be a part of the world. It's wonderful. It's wonderful to work in a place. And, I found out about myself, which I didn't know because I didn't have a passport till I was 21 or maybe 20. Right before my senior year of university, I had to get a passport to go on my senior summer astrophysics trip. I didn't realize that I loved being in other people's countries, but I do. I love being in other cultures. And I think that sort of, it is such fun to share what you come into the world with. It's fun to talk about why language is different, why food is different, why that why that pattern is the way it is. It's a beautiful way to connect to people. And so, I mean, that's
agree more.
How I got here is weird, but why I stayed is that.
Well, we all take our journeys, and hopefully the journey will have its hiccups, but it also brings us to good places. I wanted to mention to our audience that you and I were together in Abu Dhabi last March as guests of the Alif Foundation, at a conference on cultural heritage protection. We've put the link to Alif in the chat for you. Alif has funded projects for the Abraham Path and for Turquoise Mountain, and that's one of the I think there's a growing field of professional organizations, foundations that are interested in supporting the sustainability of cultural heritage. How do you get your support to continue going? I mean, grants and individuals.
Yeah, it's a weird mix for us because we are a cultural heritage organization. We believe in supporting artisans. We believe that this matters in the world and that it connects people, has an incredible ability to transform people's lives. There is not a lot of cultural heritage money out there. Seriously, not a lot. People think it's kind of peripheral or something, which I've returned to. I've really looked at it. It's not peripheral. It's central. It's amazing. But there's not a lot of money in it. But the way that we work with artisan communities is on so many different levels. So we will basically do whatever we need to do to support an artisan and their family to get their products to market and to preserve their tradition, which means I run a maternal child health clinic in Afghanistan, in the old city of Kabul, in 3 primary schools. Economic development is a massive part of it. So the way our funding works is the US government, USAID, fundamentally funds projects where we create jobs. To them, we are an economic development. We're a job creator.
And so that justifies that funding is the job development part.
Yeah,
not the cultural heritage part.
Yeah, no, they're funding, and it, we're making the argument that there's a lot of potential for actually very high quality jobs, often for women, in this sector. And then, to small family foundations, often it's being able to support very directly, because we do it very directly, primary education, primary health in Afghanistan, that sort of thing. But overall, about 85% of our funding is actually governments and 15% is sort of private individuals and families.
You did mention that how it's, the term turned on, how turned on the people you work with have become when they see that their heritage and what they can do, their skills, their skill set is appreciated, and that they can actually make a bit of a living that way. I don't know how many are making a big living, but they can make a bit of a living that way, right? I wanted to take a minute to talk about one of your artists that we met a couple of years ago, Abraham Path Initiative, on our program, Meet Us on the Abraham Path. We interviewed and showed the studio of Mataz Hamouche, who is a Syrian refugee living in Jordan, but he came to Jordan with extraordinary woodworking skills. And I've taken the liberty of making a little excerpt from that video so that our audience can have a chance to see the kind of detail that goes into this work. This is not mass produced, right?
No.
Each piece is practically one of a kind. And so we can talk later, right? I see that. We can talk later about why that means it costs so much, but I want to roll in this particular little opportunity for people to meet Mataz Hamouche. The camera operator for us is one of your employees there, Siba Kasaune. The translator who we worked with is your head of design and production at Turquoise Mountain in Jordan, an extremely talented woman named Selma Al-Kataune. And as you'll see in this little video, Mataz is a master of what's called tin thread and mother of pearl techniques.
أنا معتز حموش من سوريا دمشق. بلشت بهاي الحرفة كان عمري 13 سنة.
I'm Anisa Mehdi. I started learning about this craft when I was 13 years old, and he actually went to the workshop where there are master artisans who are practicing these crafts in Damascus. And he loved it because it's a bridge between the past and the present, and he loved the authenticity and the traditions and culture. And he tries to push the boundaries of these crafts by getting influenced from the authentic and old patterns.
قسم منها يعني.
His father was actually into these crafts, so in every summer break, he sent them to the workshops where the artisans were his father's friends, and they actually started learning these crafts.
So rather than soccer camp, you were at woodworking camp.
In Syria, it was essential that every kid during the summer break to go and practice a certain craft.
مثل ما بيقول مثل اللي ما له ماضي ما له حاضر.
So there is a Syrian saying that says a person with no past has no present. And basically he believes that his past has a lot of stories and he likes to hold it as a love relationship. When you love someone, it's so hard to be detached or move away from him or from her.
A person with no past has no present. That's a profound statement to think about. So Selma, is Jordan your home?
Yes, I'm originally from Jordan. I'm from the south of Jordan. It's from a city called Al-Karak.
So what drew you to Turquoise Mountain?
I was always into materials, and like when I was still studying, I wanted always to do a master's degree in furniture design. And then when I encountered like Turquoise Mountain, I believe that this is my dream coming true.
And now what I'd like us to do is walk to the back to the studio itself and see some of Motaz in action and getting some of his work done. And while we do that, Selma will explain some of the processes.
Here's Osama as well.
Please meet Osama. His Motaz's associate and partner in business. They actually met in Jordan. They knew about each other in Syria, like they knew each other's names, but they never worked together back in Syria. And then when they moved to Jordan, they were actually able to meet each other. And this is where this network started. They built their own network in Jordan by meeting each other and started working together and building this beautiful workshop. So basically the mother of pearl crafts starts by drawing these patterns on the piece of wood and then carving the parts out, then starting inlaying the tent threads around. And if you look at this piece, which is a prepared piece, so it's like basically it starts as a pattern that's drawn on this wooden piece, and then they start by carving these pieces out by using a chisel, and then the inlaying part starts. So it starts as a drawing, then carving, and then inlaying the tent threads as far as the Osama showing us now. And as you see, like the tent thread is very thin, and it actually moves with his movement actually to create these floral patterns and floral shapes. And like the nice story about these patterns, that all the floral patterns that you see now, it was basically a kind of documentation of what people would see normally in their lives. This is the station where it starts inlaying mother of pearl. Mother of pearl comes as a shell like this. So they start by cutting it into like random smaller pieces. And then Motaz starts by holding these pieces and using this filing tool to make the shape.
Selma, where do they find the shells?
So when they were back in Syria, it was actually they got it from there, but now because they're important, it's hard to get or source materials from Syria, so they get it imported from the Philippines and New Zealand. So if you look at the piece, the mother of pearl is inlaid, but it's yet not flush with the surface. So they start with using another filing tool to make it flush with the surface. So now he's going to show us how it's a small side table.
Are these the legs he's cutting out?
Exactly, yeah. This is another piece, but he's showing us like on this machine, on this tool, he actually starts by taking the out the part. So then the prepared pieces set here before they go to the carpentry part where it gets assembled and then the finishing. It'll show us how it's going to be assembled.
How long does it take to make some of these pieces, Selma?
So if 10 people are working on this piece, it takes around 15 days.
10 people, it still takes 15 days.
Because there are like different steps, and each person is responsible for a task. So if it gets actually divided into that way, then he's able to complete it in 10 days. But if it's one person, it takes maybe months and even more.
10 people, 15 days. One person, it takes months or more. Wow. So you can see the detail that goes in, the hard work. Those were the front pieces of drawers for a chest that Motaz is making. He and Selma then showed us another dresser, an older piece that's fully inlaid with mother of pearl. Look at that. Full mother of pearl inlay is not done much at all anymore, they told me. When I asked why, Selma explained that full inlay went out as the cost of raw materials skyrocketed. So rising supply costs is a threat to cultural heritage worldwide. One of our audience members asked Motaz later to show us his favorite flower, and it is the Damascene jasmine from Damascus. Motaz remembers the jasmine aroma wafting through the streets of Damascus. He told us it reminds him of home. So what a wonderful human being, what a wonderful man, struggled, found a new home, and is making it work. Shoshana, does this remind you of some of the other artisans that you've met and worked with?
I mean, yes. I'm so in awe of Motaz and Osama, his partner. I've seen a lot of them over the last couple of years, and what's so amazing is they came as refugees, as Salma said, but they are now they're not as refugees. They have investment visas because they've built their business up and took loans from us and all this stuff. When they started, they were very close to stopping. So they had like met each other, started to go again, but they were going to stop producing because they just couldn't make enough money. And we started doing the thing we normally do, ordering, sampling, trying to get commissions, etc. Their workshop today is like a couple hundred square feet. It's absolutely massive. They've taken every different bit of woodworking, created a specialty, ajami painting, the polishing, the mother of pearl, the whole thing. And we're basically, I don't know, 20% of their business now. They've grown, they don't need us anymore, which is absolutely amazing. So that's, I mean, in some ways, that's the best that we are, when we can support people who are already extraordinary. But they lost everything when they left. Woodwork requires a ton of seasoned wood and huge machines. And if you've left that behind in Syria, it's a very high barrier to reentry. So yeah, they remind me of so many of the artisans we work with, and they're incredible people.
And they're a real success story for you.
They are a real success.
But not all refugees have that kind of success. A fellow of the Abraham Path Initiative, Stephanie Saldana, is releasing this book this year, What We Remember Will Be Saved, a story of refugees and the things they carry. And what Motaz carried, what Omar carried, Osama carried, was a skill. Yeah. You can't pack that up and take it, but you do have to find someone who will help you manifest. How do you find those people? How do you do that?
So that is fun, I think. It's never me. It's always, I mean, in the very beginning in Afghanistan it was, but what it is Salma and her predecessors, the other people in the design team, literally just go and try to buy stuff in whatever the market looks like in that city, right? You have having a conversation, try to picture how this would go with an artisan. Oh, tell me about your heritage. I'm busy, go away. Would you tell me about your design, your skills? No, you're going to steal it. I mean, artisans are understandably very protective of the skills that they have. The last thing they're going to do is just sit down and have a bunch, sit down and explain to you, give away all their secrets. It doesn't make any sense. What you have to do is buy stuff from them and then say, hey, could you make this bigger? Could we, this tray was one of the first things that came out of our relationship with Motaz and Osama. It was a woman named Victoria who basically went back and forth with them, designing, but always buying pieces off of them. And then how you find other people is you say, hey, do you know anyone who does carpentry? Hey, do you know anyone who does ajami painting? And they'll introduce you. I mean, it's not a job advertisement situation.
No, and it's a slow, careful development of trust.
Totally.
Yeah. And we're familiar with that as we were doing our trail development work. You go from town to town and you meet the mayor and you meet the shepherds and you talk to people, and what difference would it make in your lives if others came through here walking? And so I appreciate it. It's like that tin thread work. It's that kind of meticulous, detailed, very, very personal, very intimate, and very universal at the same time.
Yeah. And I think that what you evoked there of this meticulous tin thread conversation is the best of it, right? So what happens with Selma today? And Selma is our director of design and production for all our work with Syrians, Palestinians, and Jordanians from across those places. And she is unbelievable. She basically spends her entire days with the artisans, but there's a joke, a man named Abu Abdo, who is also from Damascus, and he is an incredibly tall, incredibly quiet, careful man who does this beautiful mosaic work. And whenever I go in there, he says, Selma's not with you, is she? Because they have this amazing, and then they laugh, and then she comes in, and then they laugh, because she holds them to such insanely high standards, and she creates beautiful things with them. And the least respectful thing that you could do to anyone in the world is hold them to low standards, I think. And actually, the artisans who are at the top of their game, who are real masters, they know they can create masterpieces. So when they're making little things because they don't have the cash flow, they don't have the commissions to be stretching themselves, that's survival, but it's not great. The fun of it is making spectacular exhibition pieces, stretching, doing things they've never done before, working with materials they've never done. So that's the stuff that I think we love the most. That stuff doesn't make a lot of money for anybody. What it does is pushes the boundaries of the traditions, brings them into contemporary life, which is what's always happened with these craft traditions.
And at the end of our program, we're going to show a piece from Turquoise Mountain that describes one of those extraordinary pieces, the minbar, right?
Oh, absolutely.
You brought to mind the story of the challenge you faced in Kabul, which it has to do with a big piece, a big commission. Would you tell us that story?
Yeah. So, and actually, it's sort of related to the minbar as well. So let me pop this up here. So 2021, we were doing this exhibition in Saudi Arabia at the King Abdulaziz Center, ITHRA, and it's architecture of the mosque. It was a coming together of artisans work, Syrian, Jordanian, Palestinian artisans, and Afghan artisans and Saudi artisans, creating contemporary mosque decoration and furniture. An incredible chance to display it, then tours, and a chance to get commissions, right? So Salma and Abu Abdo and Maher and many others are designing and making this minbar and these two Quran stands. In fact, there is Salma sitting at the top and Abu Abdo there. And then from Afghanistan are these incredible prayer carpets, which are handmade by Afghan women and designed by Mariam Omar, who is our lead designer. She's Salma's equivalent for Afghanistan. This stuff is sitting in the airports in Kabul and Amman, ready to go to Saudi in August of 2021 as the Taliban takes over Afghanistan. And so all air traffic stops. And we're like, well, there were a lot of things going on in our minds and dealing with a number of different things. What is this government going to be like, etc. But one thing was, how the heck are we going to get these carpets to Saudi? Because the exhibition is starting. And we somehow did. Mariam and Toby and Shakib got these carpets on some cargo flight to Jeddah, and they made it. And so they were represented in September of 2021 as part of this coming together of artisans across the Islamic world.
Extraordinary. As we didn't, I mean, that never made the news, obviously. We were paying attention to the struggle to get people out of Kabul,
Yeah.
but
While that was happening, yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So there's a lot of detail that goes into your job that you probably have to do as on-the-job training. There's really no way to get that one figured out in advance.
Totally. I mean, I've hired a lot of people for this organization over this time. And basically the thread that goes through all those interviews is, if you really want to know what your job description is, and you really want to know what you're going to be doing every day, this is a bad match. Totally get it, but don't work for us, because this is an organization that deals with a very high level of ambiguity and change. That's just what it is. And I think the people who work here and who thrive here love what they do, work insanely hard, and basically are okay with that ever-changing thing. You got to figure, there's no training session for how you get things out of sanctioned countries. It's not, you just got to figure it out.
Yeah. Speaking of Kabul, we have a question for you, Shoshana, from Caroline Gluck. She says, I'm in Kabul and work with UNHCR, refugee agency. We come across amazing people who create beautiful artwork around the country. How can we connect people in isolated areas to markets? How can we support them and give them visibility and an income? We work with Wadan in Herat, supporting women artisans trying to get wider markets, but it's very small scale. Also, I believe the work needs to level up in some cases to a new level that make them covetable and collectible from people living in the West. The design end is really a problem. Can you address that?
I can just totally agree with her. Yes, and I was in Kabul a couple of months ago in more rural parts, and the distance between rural Afghanistan and a buyer in New York or London or even Dubai is extremely large. So you got that point, you got the distance in every way you can define distance, and then you've got the quality and the design. And this is the thing that matters, and that if you don't do right, there's no economic backbone to working in craft. Basically, if you look at trends in buying around the world, they're actually really in favor of artisans, in that, there's a huge growing global market in ethical, sustainable goods. People want to buy something with a story. They want to buy their jewelry, their pottery, their textiles with a story. They want to know the name of who made it, and they want to be able to talk about it. This market is, depending on how you define it, $500 billion a year and growing. It grew through COVID, it grew through the global financial crisis, a massive, right? It's also the trend in travel, in hospitality, authenticity. Then you've got artisans, who are the people who make for this, right? So you actually, the macros there are amazing, but they're just very far apart. But you don't get to be in this market because they're also very high premium on those. And so you can make a decent wage, but you cannot be in that market unless you are very design-led and you are very steeped in authenticity and sustainability. And that means there are no children weaving carpets. That means that you're using natural dyes. It means that you are telling the story of who made it and where it came from. So you miss that entire thing if the design isn't there. So that's hugely important. And to the isolation and the distance, that is what we do, and it's hard. You have to, I suppose my major learning from that is that the development community loves silos, cliche, but okay, it just needs a bit of marketing. Well, it doesn't just need a bit of marketing. Or if we could only sort out the logistics to be fine. Well, no, you have to do the whole supply chain. And I think business understands this. Business understands you have to sort out the entire supply chain, but I think we don't so much. And so it is what Turquoise Mountain does, but it means we buy and sell, we do logistics, we do design, we do product development, we do pricing, we incubate small businesses, we run institutes training young people in traditional craft. We do the whole thing end to end. If you don't, it doesn't work. It's not an amazingly slick way to deal with this, but it is reality. And when you do it well, it really works. We will bring $2.5 million worth of products to market this year directly through us, and we'll support probably $20 million worth of sales. In other words, support artisans to fulfill those commissions. So It does work if you do it, but you got to do it at a really high quality. Back to your question.
Right. Which tends to mean that folks who don't have a big bank account may not be buying these pieces.
Yeah. I stopped apologizing for the price probably 10 years ago because these are aspirational. Not everyone can buy. And that's hard because I want everyone to be able to access them, of course. But the fact is that to even be able to be in that part of the market, a market that's growing and not declining, you have to be at a certain price. You have to be at a certain quality and design level and raw materials level. And so that's going to make it expensive.
Well,
also,
we saw what it takes.
Yeah, exactly. But you also want artisans to have a living wage and to make really cheap products, handmade, right? You can manufacture, we can talk about the climate impacts of those things, but you can manufacture not handmade cheap garments, but you can't do that with the handmade. So you're not giving somebody a living wage. So that's just the reality of the price.
Yeah. I spent time in April in the city of Baghdad, known as Karakosh, in northern Iraq, in Nineveh, through which ISIS ran in 2014, and people were gone for 3 years before they came back to the devastation. And there was a tradition of hand embroidered dresses that people would parade around on Palm Sunday and to weddings and so on. But it takes that kind of painstaking, close up work, handwork. And now people are buying dresses with those designs on them that are made in East Asia, in China, and they're wearing those, and the younger generations aren't even wearing them. They're not interested in sewing them, but they're not even interested in wearing them. So these are imperiled by modernity, globalization. Is that a trend that's going to sweep through from what you're seeing? Or, if you don't have more turquoise mountains, how are we going to keep these crafts alive?
So you're totally right. And to some extent, it sort of already had, a lot of that has already happened. And that was when we began in Myanmar, that was really what we were worried about. That was when Myanmar was opening up and Aung San Suu Kyi was being let out of house arrest. And the idea was not a conflict issue, which it is now. It's many issues now, but actually was an opening up to the crazy winds of a global market. This thing is going to go straight down sweatshop lane and all of the extractionary things that go along with that and the loss of heritage, right? So yeah, it's happening everywhere. I suppose the things to be positive about, and I don't know how it's going to come out in the wash, but the things to be positive about are that the trends in that marketplace are true of young people most places. It's a young people thing. Young people are embracing, because the disconnect is true across the world, right? It's true in Asia, it's true in North America, it's true in Europe, and it's partially social media. Everyone is feeling a disconnect. And so that connection, art and culture, is a lot of what brings people to connect with each other. So I do think that those all lead toward people reaching back to where they came from, where their friends came from, and being interested in that sort of thing. It's the way young people travel, even when they don't have a lot of money. It's the way young people travel. But how do you sort of preserve those things in the meantime? And you have to be really clever with product development. It's not just about sort of stomping around going, we must protect this stuff. Okay, back to the tray, right? So this thing, Victoria and Mortaz and Osama went through like 9 iterations of this thing, because if you put more mother of pearl on this, it gets too expensive. And deciding on the design against the strength and the thickness of wood and the intricacy changes the price massively. And whether you're making a tray or a wall hanging, so to try to get a product that is embedded in it, it comes from heritage, but that is a viable product, is about product development and reverse engineering a price. And so that's why you do need design and product development in there to preserve the heritage bit of it, because otherwise, and I think back to the last thing, back to your clothing, it's not going to be a full panel of embroidery, most likely, that's going to be accessible to people, but it may be smaller bits. It may be people learning how to bring them into their houses in other ways.
Interesting. Product development happening live on Meet Us on the Abraham Path. We have a couple of questions more for you here, Shoshana. From Raju Bhatt, do you source or know how to design prayer altars for home use? Do you like custom orders?
We love custom orders.
All right.
So we did actually design an entire home mosque for someone, and it included carpets and a Quran stand and an altar, yes, and lots of different things. So we really, bespoke is probably what we do best, actually.
All right. So Raju,
Email.
we have put the contact information for Turquoise Mountain into the chat. Make sure you reach out. Here's another question from Reem Kalsoon. How can those who are keen to learn and develop a craft get involved? I'm a British Syrian and would really love to take part in learning the mosaic craft work. Would be good to know if there are any plans in making this accessible through workshops or long-term apprenticeships.
Yes, that is a great question.
Training programs.
Yeah,
for
so we
non-residents.
Well, exactly, we do, but they're all in Jordan. One just hard truth is this particularly woodwork takes a very long time to master. This is a year thing, not a month thing. Jewelry can be mastered more quickly, months. So it really depends on the craft. Mosaic is something that, Abu Abdo has spent his life learning. And so that's a harder one to dabble in, I suppose. But so we run training courses. Woodwork is usually about 2 years of base training, and then you become an apprentice in someone's workshop, and then you either go out on your own or are hired and then are full-time working in somebody's workshop. But we are increasingly doing sort of more, I guess, what I call outreach, but which is putting on workshops and create. So we have in Jordan, we have a design course that is online, which includes a lot of mosaic motifs and things. So there are definitely ways to get involved from Britain. So write to me and I'll probably put you in touch with Salman Siba.
Okay, that's interesting. There are lots of options nowadays with online. I mean, there's interest even for people to watch workshops and watch the education process.
Yeah,
the how-to.
It's true. I mean, there's a whole conversation going on about creating ASMR videos, which is not exactly what you were saying, but the process of making, people love watching it. I wish I had my mosaic props here because it is the most insane technique. This is all individual pieces of wood. The way it's made is that it's actually sticks chosen very carefully and cut and planed to a perfect shape, and then bundled by the artisan. And then they slice it, and then that is laid flat. I mean, you can't miss any of those pieces by a single degree. It's the most precise craft I've ever seen in my life. And it's beautiful to watch. So yes, I do think we should do more sort of how-to videos.
I think it'd be a very interesting thing. And it might be even a source, I've talked about product development, it might even be a source of revenue generation for your organization, as people want to participate. And then maybe they'll travel to Jordan or other places where they can experience it live and walk along the various walking trails that are there also and get to know a place. I wanted to ask you about where things may be going for Turquoise Mountain. What are you seeing down the road?
Well, what's the next step that we are already taking down the road, which is definitely sort of forefront in my mind, is really expanding our work with Palestinian artisans and setting up a new home in Bethlehem, which is just started. And so we're on this incredible building right at the top of Star Street, a couple 100 feet from the Church of the Nativity, and working with, glass blowers from Hebron, tile makers from Nablus, jewelers, mother of pearl artisans from Bethlehem and more widely. So that is very exciting. It's pretty incredible what is made across that region. Sometimes incredibly local, like embroidery traditions across that region are so localized. That is a Karak print. That is a Damascene print, incredibly localized. And other things are more are more widely and more shared, perhaps. So that has been a lot of fun. I'll show you a couple pictures of what it's looking like in our Bethlehem home, actually. This is our new building. It's a historic building, obviously. And so we have to do a little bit of refurbishment, but just like you can get a sense of just the grandeur of this street in Bethlehem. These painted ceilings and stained glass. Okay, so working with two different jewelers right now in Bethlehem, Nadia Abu Ghattas and the Katan family. And one of the traditions I've totally fallen in love with, which actually is sort of appearing in Paris Fashion Week very soon. So those pieces are imprints of olive leaves. So you take the olive leaf, that is the mold for gold or silver. And so each print, each piece is totally unique, comes from a single leaf.
The pendant,
yeah,
the earrings, of the ring, each was originally a green leaf on a tree.
Yeah. So that's one thing we're doing. And this is very new. I mean, the last couple of months, doing glass in Hebron, working with Samer Natche and Yakub Natche. So this clear glass, and then this Phoenician glass, which is the most amazing technique. They pull sort of filament through the glass. And actually Samer Natche brought this tradition back. They weren't doing it anymore. So just incredible stuff. I mean, you know, there's an entire Netflix series on glass blowing. It is totally mesmerizing. It's just magic. It's alchemy. This is Fatima, who is Selma's deputy, who lives in Jerusalem, and she is the design and production lead for all of our Palestinian artisans. And, you know, this is what it looks like, is they're just looking at heights and distances and colors and detail. I think her job is amazing. Sometimes I feel like I actually want their job, except I don't actually have a design background.
But there's something to that, working with your hands.
Yeah.
And a lot of us, I know here in New Jersey, I can't wait to get into my garden so I can be working with my hands, or playing my flute because I'm working with my hands. Typing doesn't have that same kind of resonance, although we're all very, very good at that now. A couple of folks wrote in to ask if you're interested in starting this business in India. Has India been on the map for Turquoise Mountain?
Good question. There are a lot of places on my mental map. I think that, I mean, I would love to. I mean, India is incredible. I think that there are other places where it's at higher risk, I would say, but equally, I know that it's disappearing in India too. I know that it's under threat there. And so I'm of two minds of it. Yes, I would love to work in India.
And you are working in Bethlehem. And Bethlehem and Christmas are very closely associated, especially when it's the Bethlehem you're talking about and not the one in Pennsylvania, a couple hours drive from me. How does the Christmas season inspire you? Do you see there's something coming up for you at Turquoise Mountain in Bethlehem for Christmas?
Yeah, I think we're getting very excited about Christmas decorations, because we have before. I mean, we started looking at working more with Palestinian artisans over the last, like, this is us really starting, but we've been thinking about it for the last year and a half or so. Mm-hmm. So last Christmas, we have an amazing showroom in Amman. It's probably the best physical location we have anywhere. It's just our most beautiful things made by Syrians, Jordanians, and Palestinians from across those projects. And so we did a huge Christmas line of ornaments, and some were mosaic woodwork, some were Ajami painting, and some were blown glass from Hebron. So we kind of, and it sold so well. Oh my goodness, it was a huge thing in Jordan. So I think we want to do that and more, but probably more importantly, our building will be ready, and we will have enough product lines ready to go that I think we're essentially ready to sort of open that site and open our doors in early December. So I think Christmas is going to be us saying, hello, we're here in Bethlehem.
Well, for a couple of years, nobody was going to Bethlehem for Christmas because of the pandemic. We came up with a live online tour in Bethlehem, and our guide walked an audience down Star Street and went into some of the shops there. But you can expect busloads this year.
I hope so. I watched that webinar. I think it's so cool. I love, I think people don't, maybe this audience does, but I think people don't know where Bethlehem is or what it looks like or who lives there. And it's so magic to make that place come alive. Yeah, we would love to be a part of your Bethlehem Christmas.
We'd love that too. How would you like to conclude? What do you want to leave our audience with here today?
Well, I was thinking of what Motaz said, really, that, you know, if you don't have a past, you don't have a present. And I think actually in a world that feels increasingly unstable and difficult, people are having their present unseated. So if you don't have a stable present, what the heck are you going to do? I mean, how does that feel? And all of us have had different experiences with that. But that's where actually being able to reach back to the past makes the present so much better. And particularly when your present is under severe threat. I just think this is such magic. It's like, it's joy, it's connection, it's humanity, it's beauty. I have fallen in love with what cultural heritage does to connect all of us. So that's sort of my parting thought, is just how important and central it is to all of our lives.
Our past, our present, and our future.
Yeah.
Thank you, Shoshana. Online programs like this are part of the Abraham Path mission to introduce people and cultures from the region that geographically is Southwest Asia to you, our expanding international audience. API is a US-based not-for-profit. Since 2007, we've helped develop walking trails in Southwest Asia to encourage intercultural connections and foster friendships across the challenging divides of our time. We are working toward a future in which the people of geographic Southwest Asia are celebrated worldwide for their hospitality, and the landscapes there are known for beauty and variety and jewelry and beautiful blown glass and carpets and mosaics and all of the things that we have been exposed to so beautifully today by Shoshana Stewart. I'm Anisa Mehdi, and for all of us at the Abraham Path Initiative, thank you for joining us. We will leave you with a video about one of Turquoise Mountain's commissioned work.
كفكرة المنبر فكرة جديدة، فكرة حلوة. من 2011 الفكرة براسي هي المنبر، والزلمة اللي حكى لي انه اشتغل منبر ولسه بيجيك 100 منبر عليه وجوز ما تلحق شغل. هلا شعوري انا وعم اشتغل بالمنبر كنت كثير مبسوط وفرحان انه يعني هي اول منبر بينشغل موزاييك حينحط بمسجد، وهذا المسجد حيكون فيه الشعائر الدينية. المسجد هذا رح يفوت له ناس الله أعلم من جميع الدول، من جميع العالم، يعني حتى المسجد يعني بفوت عليه أيام سواح، والشعور لا يوصف إنه أنا عم اشتغل أول منبر موزاييك، ونحن بهذا الوقت يعني تأخرنا كتير، كان لازم من قبل كتير نشتغله.
كل المنابر الإسلامية بتنشغل بالخيط العربي. هي القطعة مميزة جدا إنه عم تنشغل على موزاييك. هي بالأخير هي تحفة فنية، وهذا فخر إلنا يعني بالأخير، يعني إنه نحن عم نشتغل مع تركواز ماونتن بهيك تصاميم بهيك شغل، يعني إنه هي عم تشجع الحرفيين على هذا الشغل. أنا يعني بشتغل كتير، بس أول مرة بتمرق على راسي هي القطعة، وهي كتجربة وحسيتها انه تجربة ناجحة يعني الصراحة.